Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Matt Garvey and we are here to talk about making comics. In today's video we are going to be discussing how to break into comics. Welcome back to the channel guys. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Garvey and I'm a comic writer from the UK. Over the last 10-11 weeks or so I've been sharing my comic making process from start to finish. So if this is your first time to the channel, welcome. It's nice to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss out on any of my future videos on how you can make comics as well. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for the ongoing support. I really do appreciate every thumbs up, every nice comment I've been getting in the comment section down below is always appreciated. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so in this video, we are going to be talking about how to break into comics. And some of you who may be watching this might be thinking, well, Matt, you've never worked for Marvel. You've never worked for DC. So, you know, you've not technically broken in. And you know what? You are absolutely right. I have not worked for those companies. But as I said in my last video, and I'll put a link in the description to that as well, breaking into comics means different things to different creators. And while I've not worked for those companies, I have had portfolio reviews with people at Dark Horse, people at DC Comics and various other publishers, and I have pitched them comic ideas. As well as that, I do have friends who work in the industry that have given me advice over the years on how to get noticed, and because of that, you know, I've made contact with quite a few editors at different companies as well. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share that advice with you guys out there, and you know, if it helps you in your comic making journey, at least you've got that, and hopefully it will help. So here we go. Okay, so point number one, and this point is for absolutely everyone out there in comic making land, whether you're a writer, artist, colorist, letterer, inker, editor, it doesn't matter what part of the comic making process you actually do. This advice is for absolutely everyone, and that advice is to have a body of work. Because yes, it's true that, you know, some people will make their very first comic and then get discovered. For the rest of us, it doesn't happen like that. So the more comics you make, the more chance you've got of being discovered. Plus, because you're making comics, you're also going to be growing your readership. So if and when you do get discovered by an editor, you're going to be more attractive to them to pick up, to sign, because you've already got your audience there as well. So, you know, make comics, put them out there. The more you do, the more chance you've got of getting discovered, okay? Okay, so point number two is telling your entire story in one single comic. Because do you know what I'm really good at? I'm really good at doing issue ones. I am really good at hooking the audience and getting them to want more. But what you soon realise is when you start making comics, and you're going to realise this too, is it takes time. I'm not joking. It can take between 6 to 12 months to produce one single comic. So if you're doing a 4-issue mini-series, it's going to take time. So if you're sending out issue 1 to an editor and then you're not sending issues 3 and 4 for 2 years, and that does happen, that editor's going to forget they've even read issue 1 because they're reading so many comics in their daily jobs. So they need to know you can stick the landing. So me personally, what I've started doing in the last couple of years is I've been doing a couple of one-shots, a couple of mini graphic novels, but also to speed up the process as well. Normally these stories, you know, tend to go back and forth over different time zones. I've been working with 2 different artist collaborators so I can finish these comics twice as fast, so I can show editors that I can do a beginning, middle and end, and I can do a really good end, like I wrap up a story really well. So my advice to you, you know, do a single issue 1 comic or a mini graphic novel or a whole graphic novel before you start trying to get attention, because it's going to take time, and you know, you need to show that you can do an entire story, not just a great issue 1. Okay, so point number 3 is within your comic you are going to have writing, you are going to have art, you may have colors, but you're definitely going to have letters. If one of those is bad, it's going to hurt your comics. And what I mean by this is I saw a how to break into comics panel at a Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and there was an editor from one of the big 2 who was super nice, but he was super honest as well when it came to this. Someone put their hand up and said, you know, does making your own comics help you get noticed by editors? And he said, absolutely 100%. But imagine you're an editor, you're spending all day, you know, you're reading scripts, you're overseeing the production of comics, you're reading those comics, and you know, you might even be trying to read comics for fun outside of that because you love comics, that's why you work in comics, and someone hands you a comic to read, you know, because they want to get discovered and they want to impress you, and the lettering's really bad, or the art's really bad, or the story's not great. From his point of view, he said, you know, my time is precious, you know, if I've got 2 comics, one looks really professionally produced with professional art, professional colours, and one looks a bit amateur, which one would you read? You're going to read the professional looking ones. So my advice to you is to save up your money. If you're the writer, hire professional artists, professional letterers, professional colorists. And if you are not the writer, you are the artist, hire a professional writer as well, because all these things are going to make you produce a better book, which is going to give you more chance of getting discovered. Okay, so put out the best comic you possibly can, and don't scrimp on the bits that are important, because letters, colors, art, writing, they are all integral parts of making a good comic. And if one of those isn't great, it's going to let your story down, it's going to let your comic down, so don't do it. Okay, so the next bit of advice is regarding portfolio reviews. If you were at a Comic-Con and you are given a portfolio review, fantastic, well done, you are on the right path. But remember, if you are going into a portfolio review, you were given 2 of these and 1 of these for a reason. Use these more than that. First thing to do is don't ask for a job. Don't even go in thinking you're going to get a job. You are there to be assessed by the editor. You are there to be shown how to improve and how you can get better. So eventually, if work does come up, you might be able to work together. But do you know what? If an editor starts asking you questions about your availability and how quickly you can turn a page around, then yes, inquire about work. But for the rest of the time, you are there just to make contact, introduce yourself, show your work, and then follow up after and send more samples and show them you've taken on board what they've told you, so you can get better and then hopefully get that dream job within the big 2. Okay, so play it cool, be nice and polite, and listen to what they've got to say, because they know what they're doing. Okay, so this is some advice for the artists out there of what you should have in your portfolio if you do get some portfolio reviews. I've heard this from a couple of editors, and this may not be true for all editors, but from the ones I've spoke to, they've told me that the ideal portfolio should be between 9 and 12 pages long, preferably 9 pages. Within those 9 pages, you need to have 3 3-page stories. The first story needs to be a beginning, middle and end of a single person character. The second 3 needs to be, from a team book to show you can do, single person stories and team books from the opposing publisher. So if you're doing like a single person Marvel story, have a team book from a DC point of view, and vice versa. So you can, show what you can do. And the third story needs to be a talking heads kind of story as well. So you can take, an average scene of, 2 characters just having a chat and, not punching each other's brains out, but you can show, a sequential story of 2 people having a chat and make it look interesting. Okay. Also, caveat to that as well, when you're thinking of characters to draw in your stories, go obscure. Because imagine you're an editor and you're at a Comic-Con, you're going through all these portfolios and you're seeing, in the single person story, for example, you've got, oh, look at that, it's a Batman story, another Batman story, another Batman story, oh, Spider-Man, Batman, Spider-Man, because everyone wants to work on those kind of comics. If you throw in a more obscure character, you're going to get remembered if the editor likes your book. So, for example, if you're doing your team book, rather than doing, an X-Men or an Avengers or, a Justice League story, do a Power Pack story, or Great Lakes Avengers, something like that, something that's going to make you stand out. Because if you've got that editor's business card and you follow it up, a couple of months later with some more samples, you say, "Hi, Mr. Editor, my name is blah 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 blah. Hope you remember me. I drew that Power Pack story," and they're going to remember that more than the Batman story that they saw, because they saw a lot of Batman stories that day. They saw 1 Power Pack. So what I'd say to you is dust off your Marvel and DC encyclopedias, go obscure, pick some really strange obscure characters and make yourself stand out, okay? Okay, so I know this one's going to sound obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. Only show your best work. An editor, would rather see 4 awesome pages that you've done rather than 4 awesome pages and 5, not as great pages that you've done. All editors are brilliant at what they do. They can actually tell within, the first page or the second page that they've seen whether you've got it and where your weaknesses are, okay? So just show what you've got. Even if your portfolio is only 4 pages, just show those 4 pages. And you know what? Don't hide your weaknesses, because editors are like bloodhounds, okay? So if you're not great at drawing feet and you're hiding your feet behind rocks or by cars, an editor will find that and go, well, you've not shown any feet, okay? So don't hide your weaknesses, because they're going to show you ways to improve. And if you can't draw feet, practice. Okay, so if you're a writer, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get portfolio reviews at Comic-Cons. It does happen. I have had these and they are great. Unfortunately, unlike a portfolio review with an artist, an editor can look at an artist's work and instantly see, if they've got it or, where they need improving. With a writer, you're asking them to read a comic. So if you've been given like a slim, 20-minute window to have a chat with them, you don't want them to spend, 10, 15 minutes of that time having to read your comic. So my advice to you is, if you have got a slot for a portfolio review before the Comic-Con, you put your name in a hat, and they've said yes, politely reach out to the editor beforehand and ask if you can send a PDF of your comic across. They might not get a chance to read it, but if they do get a chance to read it beforehand, at least then when you come for your time slot, you can put your comic down to remind them of who you are, what it is, and you're spending your time wisely discussing your work, and they're telling you how to improve, rather than sitting there for half the time and them having to read your comic in front of you and then discuss it, because you're going to lose a lot of your time. Okay. Also, just because you're given say like a 30-minute window with an editor doesn't mean you need to use that entire 30 minutes with that person. For example, in my my last portfolio review with DC, I was given a 30-minute window. It was late in the afternoon, they was already running, 40, 50 minutes behind, because, these things always run behind. I could see through the office, the editor looked quite tired by that time, because it was the second day of the Comic-Con, and there were still like four of my buddies waiting to go in after me. And literally I was in and out within 20 minutes, and my buddies looked at me shocked, startled, like, what happened? And I said, nothing happened. We went in, we had a chat, he paid me some nice compliments, he gave me his business card, he said keep in touch. I've been sending him stuff since, but if anything, he probably appreciated more that I was respectful for his time and I didn't waste it. So just because you're given that time doesn't mean you have to use it all. Try not to waste each other's time. Get in, speak about business, get on if you can, and just take it from there. So just be respectful of others' times and try not to waste it. Okay, so I've heard this from a couple of different editors that I know, and this may not be the case for all editors, but the ones that I've spoken to have definitely said this to me. And this one is, if you see an editor walking, across the Comic-Con floor, don't hand them a copy of your book, because not that they don't want your comic, it's because if they're at a Comic-Con, 99% of the time, they are really busy. They're either, doing portfolio reviews or, meeting, other creators that they're currently working with, because, it's rare that they're in the same room together, or, they're off to, do a panel, that kind of thing. And they can't physically carry every single comic that creators want to give them, because, I'll go give them a copy of my comic. Then I'll tell my table mate that, I just gave my comic to the editor. Then he'll go and do it. And then, it's a snowball effect. And before the editor knows it, they've got a pile of, 15, 20 books. And unfortunately, they can't have to carry these books home with them, and if you're in the States, they're traveling between, across country, which is hard enough. But, if an editor's over here, they're having to carry that stuff internationally, so it's even worse. So what they've said to me is the best way to touch base with them is to, do you know what, just go and politely introduce yourself. As long as they're not speaking to someone else, like they're in a deep conversation with another creator, don't be rude and interrupt, but, try and find a minute to go and introduce yourself, say who you are, and say, look, I'd love to introduce myself. I'm a creator. I've got a book. What would be the best way to do that? Is it to give you a hard copy in now, or can I email you a PDF, copy? And that editor may even give you a business card, or they may want a copy of the comic. But the fact that you've asked rather than thrust it upon them is more respectful, and they will appreciate that you've been respectful of their time, and the amount of stuff they have to carry. So if you see an editor, be courteous, be kind, and always be polite. Speaking of being polite, you must be nice to every single person that comes to your table at a Comic-Con. Do you know why? Because you don't know who they are. Not every editor is going to wear a lanyard saying, industry, or, editor or something like that. So the fact that, you're polite and friendly to everyone's going to make you look really, really good if an editor comes to your table. I've had it. I've had people that have not, explained who they are. I've had a chat with them about my comics, they've had a little read through, and then they've introduced themselves. So I'm going to do a video about, how to act at Comic-Cons a little bit later, when we get to that stage. But, so don't be sitting there at your table on a phone or speaking to your table mate next door and ignore the people that are, have taken the time to come to your table, because you don't know who they are. So be nice to everyone. Also, make sure you're at your table on time. Editors do have a tendency to walk around the Comic-Con floor before the show is open, before it gets crowded. So, if you're at your table before, you're going to get some one-on-one time with them to have a proper chat. So, be nice, be respectful, and be early. Okay, so that's what to do at a Comic-Con if you want to get, an editor's attention. But, what if you're like me and you're based in the UK and all the editors, from Marvel and DC are based over in, New York and LA? What do you do? Well, my advice to you is to read some comics. Why read some comics? Because inside these covers of comics, it tells you who has worked on these comics. So do you know what? Read the comics that you're enjoying and the ones that you'd like to work on eventually. Get the names of the editors and assistant editors that have worked on them, and you know what? Send them a letter. You would be surprised how a nice personalized handwritten letter and a copy of one of your comics goes a long way. And that's not me saying pick every single editor at Marvel and blanket them with copies of your comics. Pick a select few and show them, introduce yourself. Again, don't ask for work. Just politely introduce yourself and just say, you'd like to get on their radar. I wanted to send you a copy of my comic. Is it okay if I send you some more when they're ready? And you know what? Editors are nice people. Sometimes they write back, okay? So, do that. And they'll also hold on to your book. So, and the reason why I'm saying don't blanket everyone, because say, editor Dave that's working on one book, really enjoyed your book, but, he doesn't have anything, but he knows, editor Maggie down the hall, she's got an opening for, a short comic, a couple of backup pages that need doing. He walks down the corridor and goes, oh, Maggie, I've got a comic writer that I think you might like. And if she goes, oh, he sent me one too, and the letter's exactly the same, it doesn't look good, okay? So be select on who you send stuff to. And you know what? You may not hear back, but you know what? Sometimes you do, and I have. So it works. So be polite. Again, I'm going to keep saying this. Always be polite. Be respectful. Just do a nice little handwritten letter, copy of your comic, send it out, and you might hear back. Also, the other piece of advice for this as well is envelopes, which I know is really sound strange. I'm going to steal this idea from Brian Michael Bendis because I've done it. When I send my comics out to editors in the States, I pick the brightest envelopes I could possibly find. Because imagine you come into your office on like a Monday morning and you've got a stack of papers that big and they're all brown and manila envelopes, and then you see a bright red one in there. Which one are you going to open first? You're going to open the red one, aren't you? Okay? So work smarter, not harder. Send your comics out, nice note, make yourself stand out. Also, just a bit of advice, if you are going to send your comic out to an editor, and politely write a letter of introduction, one thing you mustn't do with editors is pitch them comic ideas. They are not allowed to read them. They are called unsolicited pitches, and your letter will get thrown straight in the bin. This is not done because your ideas are bad. This is done for legal reasons, because if they read that story and then suddenly a writer comes up with a similar idea, they're liable for what they've read. So please, whatever you do, do not pitch your Marvel story ideas, your DC story ideas to actual editors, okay? Also, when you're writing your letters to editors, don't ask them for jobs. One, because you don't know them. And two, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but to them, you're an unknown writer. And it doesn't matter if you tell them you've got the best Daredevil story they will ever read. It needs to be done. There is no way they are going to kick Chip Zdarsky off Daredevil to let you write Daredevil, okay? You need to get along before you go along. You need to build up to where you can pitch big ideas for big characters and big stories, okay? So you need to work your way up. And what tends to happen is, when you do start to get work at publishers, you'll start small. You'll do like a backup story, and then you'll do a one shot, and then you'll do you'll cover an issue that's, where there's a space in there, and then you may get a series. Don't have delusions of grandeur to think, do you know what? I've done my first comic. There you go. I'm ready to write the X-Men. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So be smart. Also, another great way to get noticed online is giving away your comics, which I know sounds crazy, but you'd be surprised. A free PDF goes a long way. And I do this quite a lot on Twitter. And if you follow me on Twitter, you will see every now and then I'll throw out the first issue of a comic, especially if I've got the second, third, or fourth issue for a comic coming out soon. I do this for many different reasons. One, it helps generate business, because some people will read that first issue and then go, oh, issue 4's coming out soon. I'll pick up all three and the fourth one that's coming out very soon. And it's a great way to generate that kind of thing. Also, putting stuff online, you don't know who's going to read it. On more than one occasion, I've been approached by editors and publishers that have read my stuff online. So it does work. So a free PDF goes a long way. So, consider doing that as well. Which leads us into social media in general, okay? Because if you are online, and you should be online, because it's a great way of building your readership if you're starting to put your comics out, which again makes you look more attractive to editors when they're looking for new talent, because you've got that readership there before they hire you. But if you are online, be nice. It's not rocket science. Be nice. If you've just read the latest Marvel issue of whatever it is and you don't like it, do not publicly dig it out or the creators out because you don't like it. It's only going to make you look bad. It's not going to make that company want to hire you if they've seen that you're insulting their work. And trust me, editors and companies will look at your timeline. You are going to leave a digital footprint. So be nice, be respectful, even go a little bit further, try not to swear on social media and stuff like that. I very rarely swear on social media. I try not to do it at all. If you follow me on Twitter, it is literally, it's comics and positivity. That's all I try and push, and sharing other people's comics and art and stuff like that. There's no, inappropriate jokes, no swearing, that kind of thing. Keep it clean, because you never know who's watching. Because if you want to work for Marvel and DC, remember, you're not just working for Marvel and DC. If you do get to work for them, you're going to work for Disney and Warner Brothers as well. And those companies, trust me, they don't want anything that's going to, hit them in the face. I know I mentioned earlier about giving away the occasional free PDF, which is great. Other ways to get your comics out digitally are using stuff like Comixology. I personally use this service. I use their submit service, and I will do a video, later on to show you how to upload your comics on there. For me personally, as a creator in the UK, it's a great way for me to reach an audience, the other across the Atlantic, that kind of thing, because it costs a fortune to ship comics to the States and vice versa. Sometimes more than actually I'm charging for the comics. So, digital platforms are a great way of reaching an audience of people that, you would not meet a comic on, and it's a great way for them to support you and again build your readership up. And editors and publishers, they do look at, Comixology and stuff like that, and look for talent, look for good artists, good writers. So it's a great way of getting discovered as well. And while we're talking about digital comics, another great way, of getting your work out there to get discovered is putting your comics out, on a Kickstarter. Once your comics are ready or near completion, doing a Kickstarter campaign, is a great way of getting noticed. Especially if that comic does really, really well on Kickstarter, editors are going to notice that, publishers are going to notice that, because people online on things like Twitter and stuff like that are going to be sharing that, and people notice it and people check it out. I know a couple of creators personally that have used it as an entry point and have got work with publishers from that. So Kickstarter is a great way to go when it comes to getting discovered. And lastly, the best way to get noticed by Marvel and DC is actually to do work with other publishers, smaller publishers. Just because a publisher is smaller does not mean they are a lesser publisher. It just means they are not a behemoth like a Marvel or DC. But it's a great way of getting your work out there, and it shows these companies that you can work with publishers, you can make good comics, and you can get your comics seen by other people. But you need to find these publishers. So there's a link in the description that's going to take you to a site where you can actually look at what companies out there accept submissions, and it's going to show you how to submit. So make sure you read all the guidelines before you submit, and make sure you do it correctly, because one thing publishers hate is if you can't read directions when you're submitting your comics. So go out there, do your create your own books, have your body of work, back to the first point, put them out through smaller publishers, and it's a great way of getting noticed by the likes of Marvel and DC. And that's another video done, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found that useful and interesting, and has given you some ideas with regards to how to get discovered while making comics. If you have found this video valuable, please give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss my next video. I'm going to keep saying it every single week, and this video is no exception. If I can make comics, anyone can. I will see you in the next video. You take care of yourselves.